brings me to a dilemma, I guess. So if you have somebody who has served in the military and is now totally against a lot of the things that the military has done and anti-military or anti-war, somebody like, say, Adam Kokesh, or even a lot of the people that I've had on my show were in the military. Now, they weren't necessarily in combat. Thomas Woody, who hopefully will be coming back to the show soon. He's just had a lot of personal stuff going on. So, but hopefully he'll be coming back to co-host. He was in the military. Pete Murtha, who used to co-host the show, but had to leave because of stuff with work and not really having enough time. He was in the military. There's so many people that I talk to. Ken Shorgen, who's on the show every other Thursday, he was in the military. I didn't really get into details with him. Based on how old I think he is, I mean, he could have been in Desert Storm, but I don't think he was in any combat, but I'll have to ask him. And he could have been in a totally different area of the military. You know, you can be in the military and not be someone who is I don't know what you'd call it, you know, in a unit that actually, a combat unit. So, and Ken said, you know, I joined the military to get money for school and not have, you know, student loans. And then he was done with it. So he probably did like 4 years or something like that. But I'll ask him next week when he's on the show just to clarify. But there's all these people that I know that are great people that have been in the military. And, I was going to mention somebody else, but they don't like their name being mentioned. So I'm not going to mention them. But they realize what it is, and that it's really just the mercenaries of the politicians, and that all these wars are unnecessary. And like I said, a lot of them had joined for different reasons. Like, I think Thomas as well. I think it was for the same type reason. I think he was in the Navy for some reason, because I know he talked about ships. But like Ken's like, hey, I'll get some money for college. So it wasn't I'm this big patriotic guy and I want to join the military to serve my country type shit. And that's the shit that they'll show you when there are commercials and stuff like that. But I don't know that the majority of people that join the military, that's why they're joining. Now, I tend to think since 9/11 and at least since the Iraq War, that more people realize what the military really is and would stay away from that. But I'm sure there are, the same thing happens, that they are maybe promised that they won't be in combat because maybe they don't want to, or they won't be in a place that they don't want to be in. I mean, there's bases all over, like we've talked about this before. I think it's like 200 plus bases. So you could be stationed all around the world in places that there, at least currently, is no immediate conflict, although we're going to talk about what's going on where a lot of this stuff could it possibly lead to World War III. And are we technically in World War III now? I mean, we'll talk about that later in the show. But so when I look at these people that come back injured and that are screwed over by the U.S. government, because you have a government that promises them all these things. They promise them, oh, you're going to get all these benefits, and you have the VA, which there was a whole big VA scandal. I never really talked about it because I it's not something, I heard some of the things about it, and I know enough about it to know how fucked up it was, but I didn't do a lot of research on it to do an actual show on it. But I know that they, the weight, and they're just veterans are totally screwed over, and they are used up by the military. They are promised all of these things, and a lot of them don't get what they're promised, and a lot of them come back fucked up. Now, whether it's whether it's mentally or physically, a lot of them come back fucked up. Now, some of them luckily don't end up in an area where they see a lot of this stuff. Like I said, I had a friend who had died. It's so fucked up. He was in Iraq, and then he comes back and dies in a car accident. And I hadn't talked to him since he'd been back. And it's funny because at one point, before he joined the military, because he couldn't afford his apartment, and before he was going to join the military again, he was talking about it. He was like, yeah, I'm going to join the military. I'm like, don't fucking do that shit. He was in it before. And he was like, why don't, at the time I had a 1-bedroom, and he's like, and he was a good guy. He was not somebody that, he was just a general nice guy, at least with me. And plus, he was a lot smaller than me too. So I didn't worry about him. Like, I had always been, I guess, not paranoid, but with all the fights I've been in and people fucking me over and whatever. And he was a lot smaller than me. So I wasn't worried about that neither. But not that I would even think he would do, something to fuck me over. He was a really nice guy. And he was just like a couple years younger than me. And his birthday, I think, I know it was in the same month. It might have been like a couple weeks before mine. And we just really clicked. It was like one of those people that you're friends with that you just click with. And we had a really good relationship like that. And so he talked about, okay, why don't you just get a 2-bedroom, and, you can save money, and then I can afford to stay here, because the job he worked in the club industry, and, they weren't paying a lot, and then hours, sometimes he wouldn't get hours and shit like that. And in what was funny, not funny like that, but he had his family had a lot of money, and I know his parents did, and he never really talked about it except for his uncle who lived in Las Vegas, and his cousin, like how his cousin would just throw around money, that they had a lot of money and he didn't want it. I don't know what went on with his parents. He was Indonesian. But I don't know what went on with his parents, but it seemed like something had happened where he didn't want anything to do with them. So I think because they were like the rich type of parents that want to control your life, and this is what they want you to do and things like that. But anyway, so I tend to think that, at the time I didn't want a roommate, period. And I never, the only roommates I had a roommate for 4 months, and that was only because I got to the point where financially, when I had a townhouse that I bought for $262 that ended up going down to $80 because of the nice housing crash there, and how the government helped with the banks to rig all this shit and whatever. But at the time, I didn't have it yet. So, but I had a roommate because I got to the point where I couldn't afford it anymore. I had to have a roommate, and it was a 3-bedroom place. And then he left, and then luckily, well, not luckily. I guess in a way it was positive for me because I just stopped paying and then declared bankruptcy. And it's been 5 years already since my bankruptcy has been discharged. So, but I have other credit issues now. But I tend to think that if I ended up saying yes, and again, I'm a very private person, and like I said, the only I lived with, my fiance I live with now, and then I lived with a girl before, and that was the only way. Like, I didn't want to have roommates, but I'd live with a girl that I was dating, but that was my whole thing. So at the time, I was like, nah, I don't want to have any roommates. I don't want, I had a bad, I guess, experience, growing up. But growing up, me and my brother shared a bedroom, but just with my dad and living with other people, essentially, it was just not a good experience. But, I look back on it now and I'm like, maybe I should have, because I probably at the time had trouble affording my apartment too, and should have just got a 2-bedroom in that place and then, saved money. And then I think what happened have happened, because it happened, I guess, when he joined the Army and came back and went to Philadelphia. I think his sister was there or somebody. And that's where he died. And then I think like the butterfly effect thing, that if he would have not joined the military and stayed in Vegas, would that have happened? Although it wasn't because of the military, it was when he came back. So I guess on this Thanksgiving, I want to, give a shout out to him. His name was Dave. I can't even pronounce his last name, but he was a really good guy. So, and I think he died in 2008, and he was a few years younger than me, either 2 or 3. It might have been 2. So he died pretty young, and it's sad. He was the only one in the car. I had found the article when another friend of his who I had met through him, who ended up being my roommate for like 3 or 4 months, had told me. And it was, I guess, the 2 people, he was in the back, and from hitting his head, it had killed him, and then the 2 people in the front had survived. So it's, I didn't know how to react at the time, because I hadn't seen him in a while. So we didn't hang out all that much. We had times where we did. It depended on his schedule, because we had totally different schedules for a while. But, I considered him like one of my really good friends. And the last time I had seen him was when he came to Las Vegas. I think he was on break from the military. And, he told me he was here. So we hung out, and that was the last time I seen him. I mean, it's not something that I'm going to like cry over or something like that. But, I think, I can't remember when we met him. Maybe I knew him like 4 years or something like that. But it's ironic that he was in the military, and then he comes back, he goes to Iraq and comes back and ends up dying in a car crash. And when he was stationed in North Carolina for a while, he would call me. And I remember one Thanksgiving, and this was 2006, when I had broke my ankle. And there's a whole big story to that I'm not going into because it's a really fucked up story. But I had broke my ankle the night before. And I remember at the time, since he was stationed into the